2 minutes after, so let's go ahead and get started. I think, Rich, you were first.
Probably. Someone should probably press the record button though.
It's already recording.
Okay.
It happens automatically when the meeting opens.
Well, I wrote a PR a little while ago that is entirely userland changes, actually, and just lets you use send-p and therefore R without, well, yes, out having to specify W for native encryption, which makes it much more convenient for people who, for whatever reason, want to do send receive to somewhere else without native encryption on the other side. So I think that would be useful even if you, or if you even just wanted to have a different key on the other side. It, I think, could be quite useful. So if people could give it a look, I will go refresh the PR, but it seems like it would be extremely useful for any time anyone wants to change that setting or any settings about native encryption, given that they're somewhat immutable after creation.
Yeah, I think this is quite useful for, when you want to switch encryption off or whatever, and especially since it is not really practical to do it any other way.
Yep.
And especially this lets you do it on the send side, and you make it a long flag so that no one's going to do this by accident. It says right in the command line that they're opting out of the encryption.
Yeah. It's not only a long flag because I don't think the code lets you do that currently.
There's ways to
But
do it, but yeah.
like I need to check, but I don't think it really handled not having a short flag at the time.
You can define it as an integer value bigger than 256, so it's outside the character range, and then you just have to have a case for it in the switch case.
Amazing. But
It's a common idiom. But yeah.
I'm horrified by that statement, but okay.
Well, you can run out of letters, it turns out.
It's true. ZDB did this quite a lot.
Yeah.
But
Because this brings up a thing that we talked about a little bit before of maybe we need to enrich the ZFS allow feature system to make sending unencrypted and sending raw different permissions, so that someone could opt to let a backup script, an unprivileged user, send raw streams of their encrypted data, but make sending unencrypted or with the strip encryption option require a different permission.
potentially, but that I would predict very quickly that if you propose that, you would end up rapidly in a morass of wanting to extend the permission system for specific flags.
Um,
Like I agree that
mm,
it does make sense to keep them distinct that way. And I do agree, I think that native encryption is special enough that it could get a special case here rather than generalizing the hell out of it.
mhm.
Um,
But at the
I
same time,
just
there are
I would just
probably
worry
lots of
about
other
people
cases, right?
bike shedding it a lot. I can't
Yeah.
immediately think of any actually, so
Well,
it might
yeah,
not be.
because I think the biggest one is that we can't really change the meaning of what send is now. And so we have to just add send raw and send
Not raw.
not raw or something.
Or like
uh,
send raw only would probably be how you would want to do it.
yeah, and make that as a new permission. Did you have a
I
Alexander?
wonder what would be the point to send non-raw. I would guess just sending raw would be enough. Either raw or
Basically, I
whatever
think,
you want.
yeah, it's less security sensitive to send the raw version. So I might allow an unprivileged user's like that the backup script runs as to send raws, but you have to be root to send the decrypted version of the data. And so
Yeah,
you
you
would
might want to
only
give it the
ZFS allow the, yeah, but I think to Alexander's point is that making send raw its own permission that allows you to send raw, and then the regular send can continue to do what it's always done.
Yeah.
There isn't a case where you'd want them to be able to send plain but not raw, because that doesn't make sense, right? Is that what you're saying, Alexander?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I can't immediately think of one. The only other permission I can think of that has sort of currently similar properties of inconvenience would be sending without L. Just in terms of inconvenient immutability properties on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I should finish that PR that lets you do that. Anyway, but no. Do you think that necessarily would need to go into this PR or into
No.
a separate thing?
It was because it reminded me of the topic as well.
Yeah. Okay. If anyone would like to take a look, it's fairly simple. It just drops a particular list of properties from sending with P and then changes the control flow to allow you to do that in the event that you've done that. I
Right, because
remain
the normal mechanism of just it's dash. Can you control the properties on the send side with -O and so on, or is that only on the receive side?
Currently, I believe that's only on the receive side.
Okay.
There's no reason you couldn't, but
right.
There's no exposed interface to do that I can recall. So, yeah, it should be fairly simple to review if nobody has any complaints about its existence as a concept. I just wanted to bring it up and bring attention to it because there have been a number of times that somebody has wanted to do that. Like somebody actually opened a feature request after I added this to the agenda for that. And I said, it's already over there. So it seems like it would be useful and is not that invasive a change.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. I don't have anything else to say, so I guess Tony?
Yes, Tony, you're next.
Oh, yeah, just a quick heads up that CentOS 7 is going end of life on June 30th. So after June 30th, we're not going to be building packages for it, and we'll probably shut down the build bot for it. And which also means we won't have to support the older 3.10 kernel anymore. So that's it.
Sounds like
Richard
that
will be
should
happy about
make
that.
life easier.
Yeah.
Maybe. People will probably still open reports about it.
Yes, I expect that's the case. But if they're using that older version, they're going to still want a release of ZFS, not the master branch anyway.
Yeah, but does that mean that we're dropping bug fixes for the branches or just master?
We won't be doing any more releases for CentOS 7. So they could run master, which may or may not build, into the future, but we won't be building RPMs for it or testing for it.
I guess I'm mostly wondering if we're saying that like 2.1 and 2.2 will no longer get fixes if somebody reports them.
They'll get fixes, yeah.
Okay. I think it was Richard was asking about that in Slack, so that's good. Thank you.
Is there anything else on that topic? Okay, next, I think, Pavel, you had your hierarchical bandwidth limit stuff. I know it started to get some review, but was there anything else you wanted to say about that?
Not yet. I've been putting out some fires, so I haven't had time to look at the reviews yet. So I'm planning to do it over the weekend probably.
Okay.
But I have another subject. I didn't put this into agenda, but if I have a slot, then
Yeah.
I might use it. So I've been working during the BSDCan on trying to get as much userland code to compile into libzpool, so we can have like userland ZFS daemon, and we can do send and receives at least. So I managed to, first of all, I managed to deduplicate quite a lot of code between Linux and FreeBSD. I want to I want to make it a separate pull request. And as for the userland, my idea is that there is no native tier 1 operating system we support in OpenZFS. So both Linux and FreeBSD have to go through OpenSolaris compatibility layer.
Mm-hmm.
So my idea is that why not to move the userland code and treat userland code on just another platform. And so instead of having this mess that we have in libzpool or libspl, we could just simply have another platform, userland, POSIX, or whatever it's called.
Right. So like in the module/OS directory is where that would live instead.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
And I think that would be much cleaner overall. Yeah, so that's my idea.
I think it was what's it called? I think Rob said that he was working on a similar idea at one point, so you might want to talk to him if you haven't.
They did at BSDCan in person.
Oh, good. All right.
There's even PR for that topic. I think it's already.
Is there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, maybe not up to the scale, but there was PR to differentiate some things per OS.
Yes, Rob, I saw Rob's PR, so I think it will it will create few conflicts for me, but basically with the code deduplication, I have to generate the patches again, because I think that the best way to review those changes, the change that deduplicate Linux and FreeBSD code, would be first make the first commit to bring those, for example, two functions to the exact same code, so you can see each function how it changes, and that the changes should be harmless, and then the second commit would move stuff around. I think that would be easiest.
Yeah, I think that'll make it easier to review.
Yes, because a single commit is just a huge mess, and you can't really tell what changed because the file are renamed and stuff like that.
Yep.
Okay, that's it from me.
Okay, I think next was done for the async arc freeing during export. Based on the review feedback from Alexander and so on, it looks like we might want to not allow you to re-import the pool while the background free is still happening to avoid any problems with.
Yeah, let me state, I think what the concern is that if you re-import the pool, you can have stale data in the cache, and that would conflict with the pool, being changed behind your back. So I was thinking, can we just save at import time, save the import transition time, TXG time, what the pool is starting with, and anything older than that, ignore from the cache, maybe. Maybe that's more complicated. Maybe we should just have it wait. But right,
because almost everything you read is going to have an older transaction group, right?
Yeah, but we don't have an arc time when data were read. We have only burst time at best.
Okay. Yeah, we can make it wait, I suppose, until it bleeds off. I mean, we were making it wait to export, so we're just going to shift the waiting burden to the importer, I guess.
Right, and in that case, it only happens to the person who exports a pool, then tries to import it again within a very short amount of time, right?
Well, it could be
Oh, yeah.
tens of minutes. I mean, it takes a long time to
Yeah.
bleed out a big giant arc. So, yeah, I think that's a good trade because before you couldn't export and then maybe switch to an HA, you know, another host or something like that. But
As intermediate, we could check a transaction group at which we exported the pool, and if it's imported on different transaction group, then we would have to wait, because then it's obviously had been
that's
somewhere
true.
else.
That's a good idea. Yeah,
That's a
if
good
they're
idea.
if they're different, we have to wait. If they're not,
Then it's
yeah.
okay that there's some leftover stuff we're still going to flush.
Yeah, I
And,
like that.
and do we
In
cancel
that
the
case,
background
yeah, I think
flush?
we could cancel in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the background flush, I think it's a task queue. Yeah, we could make it a ZFS thread, I suppose. Just something that's cancelable. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's just going through all the lists. So at some point we have to stop and check to see like, hey, should we
keep going?
abort? Yeah.
It doesn't need to be exitable. It just needs some flags to stop evicting and exit. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, at some point, yeah.
My question, looking at that quickly, would be, so the premise is that you export the pool and then you clean out all the pending data in the ARC, return that the pool is exported? Yes?
Correct.
So yeah, instead of normally right now during export, you have to wait until it clears all the ARC buffers.
Yeah.
So like the tens or hundreds of gigs of data that you have cached before the export completes. And in this case, we're going to let the export finish and then in the background go and clean up all the cached data. And then the question is, what happens if you try to re-import the pool before that is finished? And Alexander's idea is that as long as the newest transaction group in the pool hasn't changed, then we can allow it and stop the background free. But if it is different, then we won't let the new import happen until the freeing has finished, so we don't potentially get stale data that could break applications.
I mean, and this is only for clean buffers that we're trying to walk through and clean? Okay.
Yeah, any dirty buffers would have to get written out before you could write.
Yeah,
it's not related to forced export. That's a different PR.
Yeah, at the time of export, we've drained all. There's no references on the pool, so nobody's dirtying any data. So it's just cache data.
But yeah, like for a customer that just like, hey, we want to take this pool down, import it on the other HA node and reboot to upgrade the OS. Waiting for half an hour for it to free all the ARC when we're about to reboot didn't make any sense. So being able to say, hey, I'm going to reboot now. Could you cleanly export this pool so that everything's written down nice so we can quickly HA over to the other machine, and then I'm going to reboot and not wait for all the ARC to finish freeing. Because when you have hundreds of gigs or terabytes of RAM, it takes a long time.
Another thought, meanwhile, sometimes I'm doing pool export import exactly to clean the ARC. Maybe we could add one more wait type just to wait for our ARC.
Yeah, a zpool wait would be a good one, Don.
Okay, zpool wait for the teardown? I mean, it's not associated with the pool. Oh, it's associated with an old pool GUID, but not an active pool. But
does zpool wait always have to have a pool name? I guess it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, we might be able to translate it. I don't know. All we have right now is the GUID, but I'll think about it. I'll explore how to make that work.
Maybe just drop a comment in the pull request so we don't forget about it, because that's a good idea. Partly just because it'd be useful just to know when it was done too.
Yeah, right now we logged to the ZFS debug log, how long it took. And it's surprisingly on even on my Mata systems, it's minutes, tens of minutes. So
did anyone have any other topics before we get to the next steps?
I was going to, if we didn't have a wall of topics, ask what people thought about exposing like the ZDB file object data through like .zfs, like that little proof of concept I made, because it's much easier than just invoking ZDB to print out like what records are in a file. If I was wondering, do I have gang blocks in here, or did I forget to change the record size, or things like that. But
what format would that take for information?
At the moment, I just very literally stole the printing code from ZDB and landed it in something that prints under like .zfs, ZDB, and then object ID, because resolving the entire path is a nightmare. And it's intended to be more or less a feature for people who are looking under the hood anyway. So like my intent was basically to drop like the checksum and MAC information from the printout and just give you an easy access to that, because I know a lot of people have had cases where they wanted to know, am I generating gang blocks, or like, did I update the checksums on this file, or I changed my record size 5 minutes ago to 4 minutes or 4 megs. Which files do I need to rewrite, and things like that.
Yeah.
So I have a tiny little PR I can open that does that. Do people have any urgent concerns about doing that?
I worry about exporting too much data to user space. Some people may see the .zfs directory, and sometimes it may be not privileged users.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm stripping out like the checksum or the actual checksum bits. But
if we should maybe also just have this behind a thing. I know recently we opened somebody did a PR to finally offer the option of just making the .zfs directory not visible at all, and maybe something beside that to say, control.
I have a tunable that just makes that directory go away.
Right.
But in terms of information leak, like I was having trouble thinking of which files or which metadata from that might be sensitive. If you already have the directory mounted, like, and can get in, right? Like in theory, you can get that a file exists with this ID, and maybe the file name of the file if I print that.
Right.
And
by default, it
a bunch of data
path,
about,
right?
like, no, it doesn't. I would need to do a lot of walking to get that information, and I'm not doing it.
I think ZDB does by default, but okay.
Yeah, I think.
But yours doesn't. That makes sense.
ZDB does, but this does not, to my recollection. So like you can get that there are this many records and the file is this size, but without the checksum metadata, that doesn't really tell you anything sensitive. Like I'm happy to remove whatever people are concerned about or guard it behind something, but knowing that there are this many records in a file with this inode number doesn't really get you anything, as far as I can think of.
Yeah, I think this sounds a bit like also that there was I think a PR for FiMap or whatever to kind of get that same kind of data, but in a way that's more normal, standardized on Linux. But
yeah,
we've been looking at something kind of similar to this, where we'd actually give you a checksum of all of the checksums of all of the blocks, so that you could, with a FNCTL or whatever, get a ZFS checksum of a file. That, if you calculate the checksum manually yourself by, using the SHA-256 of every 128K chunk of the file or whatever, you would be able to get the same checksum again. And there's a bunch of use cases for that. That's more simple because we're always just returning one checksum, not all of the data. But we had also thought about, returning the checksum of every block or something like that. So I think this needs a little more thought, but I don't immediately see too big of issues. I do agree with Alexander that stuff tends to find its way into crawling around in that directory, and that's could cause pretty serious performance issues if that happens.
I mean,
Also,
Go ahead.
Go on.
Also, in ZDB we have zillion of options. As was told, we have not enough letters, and I wonder how would you pass arguments to that .zfs through some another writing some magic file, but that wouldn't be multi-user.
I think this one
or
is
anything.
this is
no, it's just defaulting to
doing
printing
what
the same thing every time you ask. D&D actually, but yeah.
Yeah, this just defaults to what you would get from ZDB if you did dash DDB,
all the D's
dash
and all
BDB.
the B's, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
No dash capital Z, that would have to read the L0. We're not. No.
But even for example, how would you specify a file for which blocks you
just
want?
Object ID. That's all, and then it would just give you all of them.
But where to put that object? Sorry.
Like it's .zfs/zdb/object ID. That's it. Like you read that and it prints out what ZDB data set object ID would have given you with like anything we decide is not a good idea to print cut off.
Yeah, that reminds me, I recently created a data set with 6 billion files.
Yeah.
I'd like to see on the out.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that it would be slightly sad. Well, I mean, that wouldn't be that sad unless you tried like reading all the files, because right, that's just walking 6 billion files or whatever, which is not fun, but you're already having to do that for doing various lookups anyway.
Yeah,
so
I had periodic tasks trying to run find on that to build some indexes.
you might like a send stream I have that has 0 bytes of data and is 200 gigs. ZFS lags really badly if you try receiving it. But that's an aside. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason to have a tunable to just kill it, right? Is if you find a problem, turn it off, but it solves a problem that I have, and I've had a number of people say they had. And one person I talked to said they just script ZDB whenever they need it. So, yeah, it's live, exactly. And like, it's not necessarily taking a hold to guarantee that you're getting that, like, if you update it in the middle, you're getting the latest data. Well, I mean, it does, but it doesn't update but you were always going to have that race. Like, the goal is not that it tells you the exact state if you're trying to race it. The goal is
but yeah, this is effective. It looks like all this has some of the stuff you've stripped out still in it, but this is what the modeled ZDB output.
Basically with like the path and the checksum just not there. And it also will print like the mag and salt on encrypted blocks, and it won't do that either. But like just that information. I was going to strip out like the DVAs, but I don't think you can really usefully do anything with those without having raw disk access, at which point we have other problems.
Right.
So I find it useful. I haven't immediately crashed my system running it for a week or two. I figured I'd ask if anyone thought it was a terrible idea before I opened a PR and got told it was a terrible idea.
Should be root only, just in case user has no any permissions for data set, so that he couldn't observe what's going on.
I mean, if the user doesn't have any permissions, they can't even get into the directory object, right? So like they can't.
Well, the .zdb is, or .zfs is in the root of the data set, not a specific directory.
Yes, but if you can't get into the root of the data set, you can't necessarily know that you
traverse to the .zfs. Yeah.
I think.
Well, yeah, but if somebody doesn't have permissions for some directory, but it's like tracking some other's memory to get encryption key, so I don't know. Obviously, it's more granular here, but still, it's an information leak.
Sure, it's an information leak, but like, what can you usefully heuristically do with the information? Like, you know the object exists, you know where it is on disk. You can't constructively do that much about it, right? You could also observe that from df's output, that like the file is changing. So I'm happy to remove anything people think is an information leak that can lead to problems, but I don't immediately see what you can gain off of that.
Although I think I'm a bit with Alexander that it makes sense to just have the default permissions on that .zdb directory or whatever limited to root.
Yeah. I mean, that's simple enough. I think it might already be. I can check.
Okay.
But and like there's also a global kill switch, so if you think it's a problem, you know, it defaults to off, don't use it.
Right.
But yeah. I'll open a PR and people can voice their opinions.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
And then next up, we've got the fast dedupe PRs. I think a couple of those are in pretty good shape now, although I think some of the later ones could still use a bit more review. You know, Alexander's been a rock star there, but it'd be really nice if anyone else could contribute a bit. And we have the newest one. So dedupe prune is now posted there as well. So this combines with the dedupe quota feature so that once you hit the quota, that you might ever be able to use dedupe again. Effectively, you can specify, you know, dedupe entries older than this many days old, or, you know, the X percentile of my oldest entries. It will go through and remove those from the unique list in dedupe, freeing up space so that you can add more dedupe entries while staying under the dedupe quota.
Does the quota do useful things to old dedupe or only FDT?
Don? I think it
I
does
don't
old as
know.
well.
It shouldn't care. Why would it?
I
It
don't
just
think
measure.
that. Yeah, the quota and prefetch don't care. They're just, you know, manipulating the zap data. So, or the
yeah, it's just prune requires the new on disk format because it needs to know how old each entry is.
Yeah,
but
Also,
quota will work with old dedupe.
I think also previous code may not appreciate dedupe records which are not in DDT, so they may be tied to the feature. I think it is tied actually. Oh, right now it's tied because it needs timestamp in the record, but that might be not the only reason.
You mean the entries that are logged but not flushed to the DDT yet? To the zap yet?
Records that have blocks that have D flag but not present in DDT. Are they cleanly handled by old code? I'm not sure.
No. At least in 2.1, I think it will assert if it goes to free a block that has a D flag set and does not find it in one of the DDTs. But
on master
ZFS, if you're still using old dedupe, it will do the right thing here. So we basically made it not an assert to that you're going to be able to find any block with the D flag in one of the DDTs. That came from Matt Aarons's branch from like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The idea of being able to limit to expunge entries from the unique table. And we've done that before on customer systems. We wrote a little hack that during pool import, it would just destroy the entire unique zap. So that every time they ran the system into DDT is too big, they would just throw the entire unique one away and create a fresh one. And that didn't cause them any heartburn over the last 3 or 4 years.
It might be useful to explicitly label which of these will apply to old dedupe and which won't, because I'm sure that's going to be a question people ask as soon as it's in a release.
Quota will apply to old dedupe, but because you can't prune from old dedupe, once you hit the limit, unless you delete a bunch of stuff, you're never going to dedupe anything again. But that's what you asked for in the end. Because zap shrinking will apply there, so it will if you delete enough, you will gain some space back to be able to continue to dedupe.
Just deleting record should improve compressibility and then free some space. Maybe not as much. One thing I've noticed that in the best case, zaps are compressed at 4:1, even if they're completely empty. Maybe no, it's not directly related project, but would be nice if somebody who designed Zap many years ago done a few things here and there to improve its compressibility, like using 0 instead of FFFF for missing end of chain and so on, some other things.
Yeah, and I know based on your comments, looking at the indirect and block sizes of the log itself, going to 128K there helped a lot, as most of the logs tended to compress down to like 50 something kilobytes from 128K. So that's made a pretty big difference as well.
Well, yeah, for logs, that also should make sense for read time. So it should reduce dramatically number of seeks to read all those chains, because it's a sequential process without depending too much on prefetch. But I was actually thinking about, since we're increasing size of log blocks, I was also thinking, do we have any idea what would be the best block size for main zap with log dedupe? Right now it's set to 32K, which actually maybe not terrible, considering 4x compression. In best case, it should still be above 4K, should be 8K, so it should be compressible, but maybe slightly bigger could give slightly bigger compression. But then it would be a trade-off for read modify rights.
But we are greatly reducing the read modify rights by using the log, so we might be able to make that trade-off a lot better than we could before. We can look at some more benchmarks for that, because I know Rich did a bunch, and that's when we switched from 4.4 to, was it 32.32?
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Though obviously that only applies to news apps.
Right. But yeah, I know we did some testing early on of different sizes, and that happened to coincide with Rich doing the same thing, because I think we talked about it too late one night, and then you went and did some stuff. But yeah, it might be worth looking again now that log is working correctly, because I know when we did some of our early benchmarks, we had the problem where the AVL tree was actually sorting not by the hash, but by the hash in the wrong endian order or whatever, meaning that the blocks that were actually going to be beside each other in the zap were sorted apart from each other in the AVL. And that meant that we lost a lot of the gains that the log was adding at first. But with that fixed now, we can rerun those benchmarks, and it might be that, yeah, a larger block size, or even at least a larger indirect block size, might make a pretty big difference as far as the seek time and the read time. And maybe Don's prefetch code, he can even give us an interesting benchmark about that.
Indirect block size 32K we're using even for data. It's default now.
Right. Yes. You shrink the indirects.
Increasing that probably doesn't make sense from a read modifier, just for random write overhead. Actually, it wouldn't be that much random now. It would be relatively linear.
That's kind of the idea. I think we already have separate tunables for zaps, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
For DDT zaps, well, I see variables that must be tunables somewhere too.
I was going to say, at least the original DDT was just a hard-coded constant. So
there are tunables.
Yeah.
DDT zap default BS.
Okay.
All right. I think you guys merged a tunable for that, maybe?
We did separately. Clara did a one to let you set the maximum size of a zap to while it's still a micro zap, because for directories with under 16,000 files, it makes a huge difference in how long it takes to create a file.
Yeah. I don't see the one for, well, assuming you're talking about it being in the PRs and not currently live, never mind.
Yeah, the one for the directory zap is
Yes.
like 2 years old. It's been merged forever.
I was looking specifically about like DDT Zap tunables because I see
Those are from your PR.
I think this was actually mine from a few months ago.
I was going to say I added tunables for the Zaps in general. I thought, oh no, that was me. I did do that.
Well, I think it was Alexander's idea, but yeah,
probably
something like that.
But no, Git blame says it was me. I just can't read. I was looking at DDT, not DD2zap.c. Never mind.
Yep. So yeah, we'll experiment with those a little bit more as well to see if there's any other gains that might mean we want to use a different default if you're using fast-dedupe.
One more thought, while reviewing quota patch, obviously it's not a reason to stop what we have now, but seems that if I remember correctly, now we have quotas only on disk space. Was there any thoughts about limiting memory usage?
I think mostly we thought the memory was always going to take less room, or that by limiting the size of it on disk, that would mean that it wouldn't use more memory than that.
In memory, it would take probably twice less than on disk, but slightly more complicated because of dirty pages in plain text, uncompressed.
But you're meaning to actually apply the quota and not dedupe when it's over that size, or you mean just like not let the DDT take more than so much of your arc?
Just stop growing. Apply quota to memory usage, not only to disk space. Not sure it could be work around it. I could manually set property to about my amount of memory, and then practically memory usage by DDT won't be higher than about 50%, just because there's only one copy in memory, something like that. But I guess it could be useful to have some sort of auto, but based on memory size, not on disk size.
Yeah, we could overload auto in the future to mean both, but right now it just means disk.
Yeah, it's from our early experience and my understanding, it doesn't make too much sense to have dedupe device. Generally, science normal data and dedupe are written different times, and write bandwidth never adds. It's always separate. So and if somebody has special device may be bigger than memory size easily, just because it doesn't need to be all in memory. Which means to not get out of memory, I would have to set quota explicitly.
Yeah, and I guess the hard part is you'd have to figure out for yourself what the ratio is of disk size of the DDT to the amount of memory it takes. And I think the biggest problem with that is it's probably not exactly consistent because of just inefficiency of the zap and so on, that the size on disk doesn't ever correspond to a specific amount of the size in memory. And when you try to do the quota, the size in memory, the problem is some of the DDT might not be loaded in memory right now, right? So it looks like we have enough RAM, but we don't.
Well, I would say it should be pretty straightforward, because in memory we should have only one copy of data in ARC, while on disk we have two, while ZAP itself shouldn't consume too much. There shouldn't be too much overhead, while all the DDT structures in memory, they should be within TXG and be committed after. So there will be some information of the DDT log, actually. We haven't considered that, but hopefully it shouldn't be too much.
Right, and there are tunables to control the maximum amount of space that the in-memory AVL trees use. And once you get to half of that is when it splits and starts syncing. But yeah, that's might be a good enhancement to look at, is having more configuration about the amount of memory for the limit on the dedupe quota.
Oh, yeah, obviously it's not a first priority. Let's finish what we have now with to make sure we have all things completed. I really I probably already said a couple times that we really want to have this in 2.3, and we really hope 2.3 release it as we originally planned by the end of the quarter, which will be in a few weeks.
Yeah, so to that end, the other thing we're going to do is we'll make some repos. I think a Ubuntu 2204 and a 2404 with a package you can install that will give you all the fast dedupe stuff so that people can start testing this in VMs and so on more easily. Instead of having to compile it themselves, they can just install a package and beat on it a little bit, and maybe that'll make it get us a little bit more testing feedback ahead of branching 2.3. I know that's something we've in general talked about, maybe offering some kind of packages of the master branch to promote testing. So maybe this will be a good test run of that.
Yeah.
Only Ubuntu, no RHEL?
My team only has done the machinery for Ubuntu before. If people want other things, then I suppose we can figure that out. Maybe Tony already does RHEL.
I believe that Tony does, like, Alma is, I believe, what those get built on. But
yeah, we build them all.
All right, we're almost out of time. Was there anything anybody else wanted to bring up? Mark, you've been very quiet. What are you up to? Lurking, I guess. Anything else? Okay, I guess that's it. I think that means that, yes, our next meeting is in 4 weeks, which is July 16th, and it will be at the earlier time, the 9 a.m. Pacific. Maybe we should do a poll or something about that. I noticed the 9 a.m. ones get much less attendance. Does it make sense to maybe pick a different time for our alternate meeting time every couple of meetings? I know the earlier time originally was for people from Europe, but we don't seem to be getting very many of those at the moment.
I'm in Europe at the moment.
I don't know, maybe I will throw a poll or something into the Slack and see if anybody's interested in, if it makes sense to pick a different time for the alternate one or something. Anyway, thanks everyone, and see you next month.